welcome everybody. My name is Amaya Shiva, and I am the host of Your Sexual Revolution, the podcast. It is my mission to destigmatize sex and sexuality and take it back to its sacred origins. And I'm super, super excited for my guest today, Beck Antonucci. She is a personal freedom coach and the host of Raw, Real, and Vulnerable. So if you haven't listened to that yet, definitely go check it out. And I know after you hear this conversation, you're going to be all things Beck from here on out. Thank you so much, Beck, and welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here and I can't wait to dive in.
Yes, it's going to be a juicy one. So something I'm really excited to learn more about and hear about from you is, if you haven't noticed yet, Beck is not from the US. She's Australian. And I've been very, very curious about the differences in sexual culture around the world, right? Like having a European mother, I grew up with she gave me a book on masturbation when I was like 14, and I was like, this thing is dope, right? It was amazing. But there's also, I know in American culture, we learn or absorb rather, lessons on sexuality from a couple main places, right? One is Hollywood, for sure, right? What you see on the TV is how you think it should be. Number two, society. What is the subtle cultural narrative? And then number three, your family, right? Your family and your peers. So I'd love to hear from you, like, what's the culture of sex and sexuality like in Australia?
Well, I mean, I can't talk on behalf of all of Australia. I was raised in a traditional Italian household where my father's side's Italian, which means that my father is the leader of our household. And that was a very strict helicopter parenting. Send the girls to private all-girls schools. Don't let them talk to boys. I thought sex was a swear word up until the age of 14. That's how I was raised. Wow. Then I also went to a Catholic prestige all-girls school. So when it came to sex ed, I don't really remember being very educated or informed about sex and intimacy. I just felt like sex was being taught to us for the purpose of procreation, and sexual health was being taught I just thought condoms were to prevent pregnancy, and that was it. I didn't know about sex, sexual health, intimacy. Yeah. And that's from I would say that's a sheltered perspective of Australia, just through the household I grew up in, the school that I went to. Sure. And then being a coach now, working with people all over the globe, also moving to Bali for a year and a half, because I do talk about sex, intimacy, sexual health. And in Bali, I was able to meet women from so many different cultures, which is a part of why I love that experience so much. In Australia, I find we're very isolated and everyone's very similar. Whereas in Bali, there was so many different nationalities, so many different cultures. My European girlfriends seemed very, very open. One of my girlfriends told me that her and her girlfriends have been going to get sexual health tests every 6 months from the age of 16, whereas that is unheard of in Australia. Like I could literally tell you how many sexual health tests I've had on one hand from the age of 16. Yeah, because I only had boyfriends, so I kind of just thought that I was marked safe from STIs and didn't need them. And so it's been a really I feel in Australia specifically, it's kind of, we approach sex from almost a reckless standpoint of, I will deal with problems, air quotes problems, once the problem arises. I'm not going to be ahead of my sexual health. I'm not, and it's still very taboo in my opinion.
Interesting. Yeah. How did that shape your own relationship to your pleasure?
Yeah. I had a lot of judgment up until the age of 25 of sexually expressed women. I always loved sex and intimacy, but I always felt like it was something that you kept very private for one person. You built a lot of trust and then you shared yourself with that one person. I had no idea what sexual health was. And in the safety of a container with a man, I allowed myself to experience it. But I just remember feeling insane amounts of judgment and anger towards women that were very provocative or sexually expressed. because I wasn't allowing myself to have that for myself. It wasn't really until the herpes virus came on my path that I took this, oh, I'm ruined approach. So F it, fuck it. I can just do what I want now. And that's where I really kind of claimed I used to have a negative connotation towards the word slut, but I kind of really was able to be like, fuck it, I got the slut STI, let's go for it. And I gave myself permission to have all the sexual experiences that I denied myself of for so long.
Huh. That's really interesting, isn't it? There's like this, I mean, we have the culture of the bad girl in the US as well. And there's kind of like it's socially acceptable to bully the sexually expressed woman. It's socially acceptable to say negative things, to project anger towards and onto them. And I know that like I have also done that in my life. There were times where I was super jealous, and then I have been on the receiving end of that, especially when I was younger. And it was something that I think needs to be talked about more too, like how part of healing sexuality is healing the sister wound and healing jealousy and learning to like celebrate other women's juiciness and not be so scared, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not be so stuck on needing to be the hottest girl in the room or whatever the story might be. I know that's something that as I'm, in my 40s now, I'm like, oh, yeah, things are changing. Things are changing and getting this beautiful opportunity to celebrate youthfulness and like how juicy it is, and also recognizing that like the way that I viewed myself was totally skewed and wrong. I so beautiful, and just thinking that I was gross and not enough and that I needed to fit certain beauty standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that growing up in the US, I also struggled with like eating disorders when I was younger, wanting to be super, super skinny. And I remember like I would go to this pizza place and eat like half a slice of pizza, and then I'd like dab all the oil off with the napkin because I wanted to, watch my calories and stay really skinny. And I did. But what was so fascinating is that when I actually let go of that and like gained weight and got juicier, that I had so much more sexual power and like appeal. Right.
I love that.
Isn't it interesting? Like, trying so hard to be skinny and like fit into some mold. And it's a common theme, like torturing yourself to become sexier so that you can be more lovable. Right.
I mean, I
And
had an eating disorder from age 16
yeah,
all the way through to 30. So entirely resonate. For me, it wasn't to be sexy. It was to have an aesthetic where people either accepted me or felt not good enough around me so I could feel safe.
Yeah. And feel safe from what?
From a deep core wound of rejection.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Searching for belonging. I think because of my journey stemmed from being bullied so horrifically, when I went into a gym and was given a diet for the first time and changed my body image so dramatically and drastically, I received so many compliments. And because I was bullied for so long, like torturous, acute, chronic trauma of being bullied and screamed at every day for 5 years straight in a prestige private all-girls school where wealth and beauty is basically the pinnacle of success in an environment like that. Because I've been screamed so many nasty things at me day in, day out, I started to believe that that's who I was at my core. So when I dramatically changed my external appearance and strangers just started coming up to me and complimenting me, people think that that's vain, but what it truly is a young girl who really was so terrified for her physical safety. I attempted to commit suicide at age 14. So I thought that people's words would actually end up in, that would have very detrimental impacts on my physical health and well-being. That when people started saying nice things to me just because of the way that I looked, it became very addictive, because if you gave me a compliment, I knew that you weren't going to try and hurt me. If a man asked me out, I felt worthy, and it was all underneath the worth was I'm safe. You're not going to hurt me. You're not going to harm me. You're not going to hurt me. You're not going to harm me. And so that had a really lasting impact on my relationship with my body for a long time.
Yeah. And what were you getting bullied for?
My best friend came to school one day and decided she didn't like me and turned our year group against me, and they were used to scream, "You're disgusting." at me from across the classroom. I wouldn't get up at assembly. Nothing. I didn't do anything. They just,
Yeah.
my best friend decided we're not going to be friends with her, and that's kind of the way that things sometimes go in high school. And yeah, it was a really terrifying and awful time for me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I can really relate to that as well. And it's a horrible fucking experience to be bullied in that way. And, and I'm sure that's actually part of why you're great at what you do and why you're such a great coach, because you understand what it's like to need to hide behind veils and covers to be safe. And you also understand the journey of coming out on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a really long journey to unpack the nervous system trauma response that occurred then, because my fight and my protection became so fierce. I made this commitment to myself that I would never allow women to hurt me like that again. And
Yeah.
because the original trauma was from women, the next trauma was my first boyfriend. He punched me in the head with a closed fist and knocked me unconscious. So now I kind of had this, oh my God, I'm just not safe in this world with anyone, male or female. So I built this huge protection and this armor of no one will fuck with me, these really strong boundaries, this really assertive presence. But it's taken a long time to dismantle that and create my own healthy protection from within, because what I was trying to protect my from was still causing destruction and chaos in my life, even with the awareness of what it was coming from.
I think so many people end up going through that journey. And to anybody listening who has experienced that, or maybe even is, first of all, our hearts go out to you. And second of all, there are people out there who love you and will accept you and celebrate you. And those are the people to look for and surround yourself. Like, fuck looking for the people who are cool, who have a thing that you want. Like, follow the thread of the people that make you feel safe and like you're a part of the tribe. I'd love for you to share more about your journey of finding out that you had an STI and what that moment was like for you.
Yeah, again, one of the most terrifying times of my life. I think I'd only slept with boyfriends up until that point, so I naively marked myself as safe from STIs, didn't really know what they were.
Yeah.
Took a long time to sleep with partners, so thought that meant with a small handful of partners, and it doesn't matter the number of sexual partners you've had, but I thought I've only slept with boyfriends. There's no way that this could ever be put on my path. And I had just broken up with my boyfriend and slept with a man who was a very close friend of mine that promised me he was STI free and promised me that he'd had a sexual health test a week prior and it was clear. And maybe that's true, maybe that's not, because they don't actually test for herpes unless you request it and do a blood panel in a routine STI check. But I remember on a Monday getting really intense stomach pains, and I'm a very pro-natural health person, very healthy, very rarely complain of being sick or unwell, and turned to one of my best friends and was like, oh my God, my stomach is in so much pain. And as the week went on, the pain just started to increase and increase and increase to the point that I could barely walk and it hurt to urinate. And it was so unbearable that I had to go to the doctor, thinking that it was just going to be a UTI. And the doctor said to me, when was the last time you did a sexual health test? And I looked at her like, and this was part of the shocking moment where I realized never, not once in my whole life. And I was 25. And I was like, well, I don't really need one. I only have sex with my boyfriends. And she goes, well, let's just do a screening just to be sure. And she lied me on the bed, did an internal examination. And within seconds, she said, oh, honey, you have herpes. And I didn't know what that was at this point. So I'm thinking, give me the injection, give me the antibiotic, let me get out of here and we're done. And then she starts printing off an A4 fact sheet and hands it to me. And I can see words like lifelong, incurable. And that's when just it felt like the rug from underneath me was pulled. And, she was very gentle, but in that moment, I attached to so many limiting beliefs. I had no educational information about what herpes was, but bad jokes in movies, bad jokes on social media. And so straight away, I'm like, I'm ruined. My sex life is ruined. No one will love me. I have to stay with this guy now. What have I done? I hate my ex-boyfriend. It's because of him that I'm in this scenario. And I just remember walking, it was an upstairs doctor's office with the pharmacy downstairs, going to get my antiviral script, and just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I was in so much shock. I just didn't know what to do. It was really terrifying. Didn't know who to trust. I didn't know who to tell. I didn't know what girlfriend I could tell that I could trust that wouldn't tell anyone. I told one girlfriend, and then I told her a week later it was a lie, and that was just a UTI, and it was a false positive. I was just so scared of anyone knowing, and that person telling someone else. I went on Google Doctor, and Google Doctor told me I couldn't fall pregnant now. It was horrible.
Fast forward to today.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about what a fucking gift this actually turned out to be in your life and why?
Yeah, I mean, I say it is the worst and the best thing to ever happen to me. I mean, like we already touched on, I had, a eating disorder that was ruining my life, that I couldn't control, that I didn't know where it was coming from. I had no idea that it was the core wound of rejection that I was running from. And I just thought that my physical image and acceptance in the external world would create the belonging that I was yearning for. And God and life had just kept hitting me with so many signs time and time and time again. And I just was not listening. And the herpes virus is so loud that you can't not hear it. It is so impactful. It hits you so hard that you can't not listen. And so I remember being on the beach thinking, like, why is this happening to me? And God saying, when are you going to learn how to love yourself from within and feel worthy for who you are as a woman, not what you look like or not what someone thinks of you? And so that was really the pivotal moment where I realized everything that I'd been trying to do to get my love and my acceptance for self, because I thought if Amaya loved me, then that would mean that I love me. The herpes virus kind of sent me on this alternative healing route of learning how to find peace and acceptance. I just wanted to find some way to accept myself. And that's what sent me on this inner path of mentors and coaches and shamans and plant medicines and holistic healing and mindset workshops and nervous system and NLP and everything that everyone's done and traveling the world. But it really sent me on this beautiful path to find, I didn't realize that I was looking for a home within myself. I didn't know that that's what I was searching for. I was given this choice point one day. I did a program. It was called Stretch 22, and I felt like I'd broken free from almost everything, but herpes was still there. And I just said to myself, I never wanted anyone to know. I just thought I could live my life and go about life and just maybe tell my sexual partner and make sure my husband knows, but no one else ever had to know. And just life wasn't clicking. I felt like I was so amazing, but my life just looked like a shambles. I was broke. My business was was crashing. I was having a fight with my business partner. I was still mad at men. I was dating men that I judged, or I felt like were egoic, so I didn't have to tell them the truth. Like nothing was working. And God said to me that you have to use your voice around this piece. And so I decided that I would really choose myself. If no one loved me on the other side of me communicating this piece of my vulnerability, I was going to choose to love me no matter what. And that really set me free. And it laid the foundation for everything that's good in my life, my business success, my relationships, my ability to date with confidence, to experience fear-free sex. I love sex. I love intimacy. I've been having the best sex of my life this past year. It's really been the catalyst for everything that's good.
Fuck yes to all of that, right?
Yeah.
And such a powerful reminder that, like, you don't fucking know. You don't know if something's good or bad, right? There's with a limited perspective, just like in the beginning, there's no way you could have known that this was actually such a blessing and going to open so many doors, and most importantly, the door to your own heart, loving yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, Preston always says you don't know enough. Like and this is the thing, when you're in the fire, no one likes being in the fire, and life is going to continue to present fires because life's always going to lie. If you don't do a program or break free from herpes or build your business, then life's or meet your partner and then life's sweet. That's just not what happens.
Yeah.
When you're in the fire, it doesn't feel good, but you don't know. And I think what happens is when we're in the fire, we think the fire is going to last forever.
Yes.
But it never does.
Thank God.
And thank God. And we don't know enough. So I feel like it really is such a beautiful setup for success. Even as it was happening, I was like, why, God, are you doing, like, why me? I really thought I was the only woman in all of the world that had this. Like, I felt so isolated in this experience of I'm the only person and the whole world is going to reject me for this. My parents are going to be ashamed of me. no man is going to choose me. What female friend can I trust that isn't going to backstab me and tell all of Perth this about me? It was really terrifying. And still, even then, I could hear, the voice, whether it's intuition, higher self, God, whatever you want to label it, being like, there's a bigger reason. And I used to think I'm never going to tell anyone. And I could also hear this voice being like, bullshit, you're going to tell people one day. Yeah. And I was like, no, anything to not. And I always knew that it would come out and it would just be a beautiful piece of my healing, but I had to be ready. And when I was, life changed significantly.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I'm celebrating you and I'm celebrating your journey and all the beautiful blessings that it brought you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Something that I think is really interesting, growing up, I was born in the 80s, and the way we used to talk about STIs, like we called them STDs, they were called diseases, right? They weren't called infections. They were called diseases. And I'd love to hear, like, what do you think has been this catalyst for being more open, for being less judgmental, for like acknowledging our humanness collectively?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that once you've done something enough and you've tried something enough and you know that that thing that you're trying isn't working, you've got to try another way.
Yep.
And so for me, trying to wear a mask to get everyone else in the world to like, love, and accept me, only to create more pain on my journey, really just proved to me that there is nothing more that I could try and be and pretend to be and put on and wear and wait to lose. There is nothing more I can do that could get anyone else to love me, that would make me love myself even more. Is actually making me dislike myself more and more and more. That I think that we go through that journey of, we have a core human need to belong. We all want to fit in the pack. It's true.
Yeah.
We all carry that, of course.
Of course.
But when we're being inauthentic with ourselves and we're acting out of alignment with our truth to try in the exchange of approval, that approval is not belonging. Approval is fitting in. No one wants to fit in. We want to belong. There's a very big difference. And when we're trying to fit in and we're out of our own integrity and out of our own congruence, that feels bad. Yeah. And I air quotes bad. And I feel like humans really deeply desire to be their own self and to feel fulfilled internally from within. And we all have our own unique soul curriculum. So when we're trying to fit in rather than desiring to belong and we're pretending to be something that we're not, it's just not meant to resonate. It's meant to feel off because God doesn't really want that for you. God wants you to live out your divine purpose and belong in the community that you're meant to belong in, not fit in with a bunch of people. Right. And so I feel when we've tried something so many times, your body patting down the pizza, me 10 years restricted yo-yo dieting, like that doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't.
And it gets to a point where we're like, why am I doing this terribly unhealthy thing, and for the purpose of what? And once we're aware of what's driving the behaviors, I feel like that's when that shift happens, that, well, authenticity seems to be the only way. Authenticity means no hiding. Authenticity means no mask. Authenticity means no lying. Yeah, you can be private. Yeah, you can choose to hold information as sacred, but also when you're pretending or lying or not being truthful and not in your own integrity and congruence. And that's where I think we've swung the pendulum the opposite way. We live on Instagram now, and if I post something that's if I post a very professional shot of me, it'll get minimal engagement. Yeah. Because people are over the perfect feed and the curated perfect woman and the AI pictures of everyone. We want authenticity. We want to know what you actually look like. We don't want your face airbrushed and lines pushed out and gray hairs gone. We want to see your humanness. And I think it reminds us all of the humanness that lives within us. And I feel like that's innately what we all desire.
100%. Yeah. And I love that reminder that, we are all on unique journeys. And there's a famous quote from the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that it is better to imperfectly do your own dharma or work in the world than to perfectly imitate someone else's. Right? And that's so true. And that includes sex and sexuality. And, I can speak from my own experience. When I first thought I was reclaiming my sexuality, I was like a 16-year-old. I grew up with very liberal mother. Obviously, I got this book that had like, how do you masturbate? And I'm like, yes, as a teenager. And I used to think at that point, like I had all these girlfriends, we would listen to Riot Girl music.
No.
It's like, it's like very feminist, like punk rock, kind of fuck men vibes, which was a thing, a phase that we went through. But we would like buy dildos and vibrators and talk about it and like talk about sex. And I wasn't having sex yet at that point, really, but my girlfriends were. They were like a couple years older, and I was like, whoa, like, wow, they're wild. And I confused that with having the ability to communicate my sexual desires, with having the ability to give feedback in a way that feels good. Because I can say that one of the mistakes I made on my journey, learning about my own sexuality, I would get kind of like frustrated or short and like feel a lot of impatience that my partner like didn't know what to do, or I'd ask for something one time, and when there wasn't a full fuck yes, I would shut down. It was this very like little girl response. And bless my heart, that was where I was, that was my maturity and development. What it really took is, you mentioned that this last year you've been having the best sex of your life. And that's fucking awesome. And we're going to talk about that. And I had a similar revolution after getting divorced, right? Like I was in a marriage with a super loving man who's very committed, very safe, like in many ways, the best partner I'd ever had. But there wasn't like that spark for me for a number of reasons that, to respect him, I won't share here, and some situational parts of our relationship also where I was suppressing my true desires, because when I did try to share it was shut down, right? And it was like, you want to do what? Like, that's weird. When I was like, oh fuck, I'm weird, I can't share that with anybody, I better hide this, right? I better hide this. And then I would lay there in bed by myself when my husband was gone, like crying, because I knew something was off. I knew we weren't connecting the way that he deserved, that I deserved, that he desired, that I desired. And I didn't know what to do. And I was like, well, maybe I should just be a monk. I'm not a monk, obviously.
Take sex away from me entirely.
And what I realized, like when we got divorced, I realized that I had to change or continue to suffer that same way. And what I came to realize is that I was so ashamed of my body, of my desires, of being, kink leaning, kink adjacent, and not fitting into the good girl mold. And when I was younger, that showed up through drinking. Like I would get drunk and then I'd get wild and crazy, do crazy shit, and then I'd regret it when I was sober, right? And that was a horrible way to try to unlock sexuality. What has changed for you the last year that you think really unlocked having the best sex of your life?
Yeah, so the herpes virus, after that, I thought it had ruined sex for me. That when I started having sex again, it was from this like, fuck it, it's been taken from me. I can just do what I want now. But it wasn't from authenticity. It was still from fear. And I would choose really unaligned men and I wouldn't disclose. So in the back of my mind, I was very aware that I wasn't being authentic and that I was choosing men where I felt like I don't have to tell you. You're not asking me about my sexual health. You're not choosing to wear protection. You're not looking after me. I don't know where you've been. I felt very in my righteousness, but it still felt like an attack at men. Then when I entered a relationship with my ex-partner, very similar to your ex-husband, actually, safe, beautiful man, consistent, loving, protective, but just that spark wasn't there. And he was willing to try. He just didn't know the kind of intimacy that I desired. And when I explained it to him, we had a very different context when it came to sex and intimacy. For him, sex was just sex. And for me, sex means so much more than that. Yeah. And when we would talk about it, he would say, I wish I knew what it was that you wanted and I knew how to give it to you, because I would if I could. But it's just not, he hasn't gone there within himself yet. And he really wanted to, and I had to accept that that was what was true. But choosing a partner from safety without the spark, it felt like, whilst everything that he was doing was good, very, very loving, attentive, good sexual partner, that depth didn't exist for me. So once we broke up, I've gone through the whole journey of activating my voice, communicating powerfully, being in my authenticity, talking about herpes, knowing my sexual needs, desires, boundaries, kinks, being willing to share them, being able to meet a man in Bali and know that it was just something casual and be very honest and clear about what it was and where it was going and what the experience would be for the both of us. So there was no me leading him on or him leading me on, and we both really knew what we were coming to the experience for. And also I was so connected. I'd done so much nervous system work that I was meeting men. I call it in the wild. Well, when you meet a man in real life and not on the internet.
Yes.
not on an Instagram, not on a dating app. And just, I would follow the cues of my body. And it wasn't air quotes a lot, but in the moments where that chemistry hit and I met that man where I was like, I'm a yes to this person. And I followed that. It was just such an incredible, mind-blowing experience, time and time and time again. My new edge that I found was not new. My edge that I found is the best sex that I've had in my life has always been casual. I am yet to have that mind-blowing, wild one-night stand kind of experience in a container of intimacy. In fact, I was dating someone recently for a few short weeks, and the same thing showed up, where if there is intimacy, the deep, juicy, like, oh my God, like wild, fully expressed, out of my head, fully in my body, that kind of sex, I still haven't accessed that yet. So that's my edge that I'm leaning into.
Well, thank you for sharing that. The last lovers that I've had, similarly, like, we met in the wild, and dating apps, not for me. This shit don't work. I'll share that, like, I think the thing for me that really unlocked, like, really good sex is telling people exactly what I want and what I don't, and being a no to having sex and making that clear.
Yeah.
And in that way, like, for me personally, when I know somebody is attuned to my nervous system, like when I can feel that they're present with my experience, it unlocks something, right? I can feel really, really safe. When somebody is not in attunement, I had this partner about a year ago, and it was one of these things where we met and I had zero plans to have sex with this guy. He invited me to dinner and he was like, "You want to have tea at your place?" And I was like, "Yeah, but just to let you know, we're not having sex. I'm not going to be sleeping with you." And he's like, "Cool." And, like, incredible, like, listened to the boundaries that I had, and it actually opened me up to the point where we ended up having an incredible, super hot sexual experience. Like, I forgot it could be like that. But what was so interesting, Beck, is when he came a few days later, there was zero attunement, and arriving to my house and immediately being like, "Well, can we take our clothes off?" No, "How are you?" No, "How is your day?" I could feel he didn't know what was going on with me.
Yeah.
And for me, that's been the biggest key. And how people smell is the other one. Like, I have to really like how you smell. If you smell bad, it's not going to happen.
I know, my ex-boyfriend, I used to love smelling his underarms, and he was like, "You must really love me." I'm like, I loved the smell of him. And I was like, "Can we not just please have the sex as well? Because it's all here if it was." Not God's path for me, unfortunately.
How do you think that you show up differently to casual encounters versus something where there is more depth and intimacy? Like, do you think that's what's impacting the like unbridled sexual prowess coming out?
I think it is twofold. I feel like it is with them as well. I mean, I've explored a lot of the Madonna whore complex, where the man, when he's seeing a woman casually, he's kind of in that no fucks given, this isn't my wife, I can do whatever and treat her however and just dominate. Then when it's the wife, it's like, oh no, I wouldn't treat her like that. So I feel like that exists for them. I feel when it's a single experience, there is an element of, I'm never going to see you again. I can ask for what I want. I can express myself how I want. I feel like there's also for me in a single experience a little bit more dominance that comes out. Whereas in relationship, I love the man to be the leader. I love to submit to him. I want him to be the dominant. And I feel there's a deep surrender that hasn't fully happened yet that is desiring to. And there is there's a pain, a wounding in relationship of my ex-boyfriend, the one that I left, or I essentially cheated on him after years. He used to prematurely ejaculate, and I used to try and talk to him about it because we'd have sex for 1, 2, or 3 minutes and then it would be over.
Yep.
But it took me 4 months to sleep with him, and everything else was incredible. And when I talked to him about our sex and our intimacy, he would experience a lot of shame and not want to talk about it. And then because of that, he'd start to retract and initiate sex less. So I was so in love with this man, and I was just like, I will work on this with you if you'll just communicate with me. I was only 22, 23, 24, 25. And when I ended up cheating, that's how I got herpes. So in the back of my mind, there is this, it was men's sexual inadequacy that caused my pain. And then even with my last partner, knowing that it wasn't his sexual inadequacy, because from a performance point of view, he was amazing, but the depth wasn't there. That I'm like, sex in relationship again was the thing that broke this beautiful, like he was a beautiful man. My partner before him was a beautiful man. So there is a something that I don't want to call it a fear, but a caution that exists within me of like, oh, am I going to attract in again another great man? And he can't meet me in that capacity. And quite often what shows up when I meet men intimately is they have a fear that they're not going to be good enough for me sexually, no matter who that, and it just keeps reflecting. And so this is something that I'm really working on, because I desire to love. I feel all men are deeply sensitive and have these fears and insecurities, and I really want to learn how to love him through that versus have him collapse and run from it.
I think there is a lot of pressure on men to be performative, and a lot of pressure on women for a certain behavior. You know, are you the hot wife? Do you know that term? Hot wife versus good girl kind of thing. Like,
no, I don't know it.
Oh, hot wife is cuckolding is a kink that some people have, where they actually want people to fuck their partners, right? And there'll be like a hot wife, like the woman who's having sex out of the relationship, or they call them bulls, like men that come in and they'll like fuck the hot wife in front of the husband. You know, it's this whole thing. It's very interesting, and you know, I honor wherever people are in their sexuality, as long as it's done consciously and with care for everybody involved. Do you, right? Do you?
Well, as I, my thing is, do you, and do it in integrity. Like, be honest about who you are, be honest about what you're doing, be honest about what your intentions are. That's what I really love about my time in Bali, when it's just been single and that's it. It's there's a communication around what it is, so there's an understanding where we both stand. So that there's no, if I'm single and casually sleeping with someone and I want him to follow me up, I'm gonna feel upset. And I would not, but I will communicate to him what kind of aftercare I require from him to feel good in the experience. I won't put myself out there and then leave it up to the ethers and hope that he gives me what I need to feel good about the experience. I'll communicate what I require.
Communicating that is such a beautiful opportunity to check for alignment, right?
Yes.
Because what if somebody can't fucking meet you there? Well, you want to know that beforehand.
Yes.
You want to know. Go ahead.
Even I was casually sleeping with this amazing man in Bali, and Bali is a very transient place where you're flying in, you're flying out. We both just kept missing each other, but literally best sex of my life. Gorgeous human, enjoyed being in his presence. I remember one day feeling like really angry, and I walked past him, and just his presence alone just like penetrated me. I just felt so soft seeing him. And I text him because he just got back from wherever he'd been. And I text him saying, it was so beautiful to see you. He messages back, and we have this back and forwards. And then it starts getting a little bit sexy. And so we're sending these messages back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. And I invite him round. Like, I haven't seen him in months. He's just got back from wherever he was gone. And I invite him round, and all the messages were like fast, replying back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. And then he stopped. And then he replies half an hour later and writes, I probably shouldn't come round. I'm dating someone.
Mhm.
Now, in that moment, I just responded saying, definitely shouldn't come around. Wouldn't have had these texts with you if I knew that you were seeing someone.
Yeah.
Like, lucky, celebrating the both of you, and didn't text him again. But in that moment, I was just like, whoa, I would never, like, because they've broken up now and he tried to message me again. I'm like, no, your integrity to me has just, you've absolutely blown your integrity with me, because you should not have had those text messages with me knowing that you're dating someone. Like, those text messages went too far. That crossed a line.
Yep. Yeah.
And I just think integrity is so important, being honest about what you're doing, being honest about, I love channeling my energy in one place. Like right now I'm on this podcast, my energy is channeled at you. If I meet someone tomorrow, my energy will be channeled at that person. I met someone the first 4 weeks of Austin, and I was dating him for that time. And when men would approach me in Austin, I would say, actually, I'm spending time with someone. And people were like, haven't you only just met? And I'm like, yeah, but my energy is, I don't want to disperse my energy everywhere. My energy is here until it completes, and then I can shift. But that feels, I believe that my husband, and that's what I'm available for now, committed partnership, he is showing up to life with the same integrity that I am. And so I get to stay in my integrity regardless of what anyone else is doing.
Fuck, you make such an important point that I hope people are catching. But the reason that you're going to attract somebody in high integrity is because you're staying in high integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And notice that even though there was this juicy chemistry and you're like, I know it would have been fun, I know there would have been a lot of pleasure, because you have your priority clear. And that's what's creating space for people who align with that, right? Because one of the biggest roadblocks, I think, for people aligning with the quality of partner that they want is that they don't stand in their own integrity.
1,000%. I mean, I feel integrity and trust, they're two pieces that I think once they're broken, to be honest.
Yeah.
You can go on your own healing journey and realize that you're out of integrity with yourself, but people are showing us who they are all the time. And it's up to us. This man over in Bali, like, he's a professional sports player. He's literally the best looking man I've ever seen in my whole life. His energy is gorgeous. He looks like he has strong family values. He has a beautiful community of amazing people. There are so many things that are just like tick, 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 tick. Best sex of my life. Very much pleasure dom, receives pleasure from the pleasuring of me, sexually very aligned. But for the rest of my life now, I would always remember that he had those text messages with me when he told me he was dating, and then told me, a few hours later that he was dating someone else. And I feel like if you can do that to her, you could do that to me. And my ex-partner, the one that I said reminds me in many ways of your ex-husband, he just has such strong integrity. Like, I respect him. He's one of my most respected people in the whole world. He is who he is.
Yeah.
He is. I just don't think a lie could come out of his mouth. He's who he is on the internet is who he is behind closed doors. He never wanted to pretend that we were a happy relationship when we're going through challenge.
Yeah.
He's just so authentic, and he's fiercely loyal, to the point that even when we broke up and we started chatting again, he'd tell me things I didn't want to know, because he was like, I just want to be truthful. I don't want to cross any boundary or break any line, and I want everyone to know where they stand. And I really loved that about him. And I value that deeply, and it's who I am as a person as well. And I just have zero tolerance for anything less than that.
Knowing your absolute yes and your absolute no, because everybody has them and it's going to be different for everybody. For some people that might not be the deal breaker, and for you it is. And I think that's the important thing to understand, is there's just so many ways to be, to relate to other people, to be in relationship, like, there's polyamory, there's monogamy, there's celibacy, there's asexuality, and all of these are valid, right? All of them are valid. But the most important thing, I agree with you, is the integrity piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that
I was just to say that I have no judgment around what anyone is. I think that's what's most important. As long as you're in integrity with what your truth is.
Yes.
That's the important. Like, I know people who are polyamorous who meet single women who are desiring committed monogamous relationships, and then they meet this person, and then after some encounters it comes out, by the way, I'm polyamorous, or I'm ethical non-monogamous, or whatever their thing is, And these women are left like, I just met this person who I really like, and now you're telling me this, and I don't know how I feel about it, and maybe I could be open to that. I'm like, that's why I like telling people about herpes from the get-go. I'm like, you don't have to decide 3 dates, 5 dates, 10 dates, 20 dates in, and like, you just know. Let's go. Like, if it's a no for you, it's a no for you. It's all good. It doesn't mean anything about me. I just want you to know so you can come to your own truth about how you feel about it.
Right. And what you just said is so important, right? It doesn't mean anything about me, how other people choose to respond. But what's important is that that we all stand in our own integrity and truth. Like one of the podcasts I did recently is all about the RBDS SM framework of conversation for conscious relating. It's something I learned at a like shamanic sex school. And it's basically like the R, are you in relationship? What's your relationship status and style? What do you want? The B's, what are your boundaries for this experience? The D is what are your desires? The S is what is your sexual health status? Like how many people have you had unprotected sex with since you were last tested? Do you have any current STIs? And then the M is meaning and aftercare. Like if we have this experience, what is it going to mean to you? And how do you need to be cared for afterwards? Should we decide that there's proper alignment to move forward? Right? And when you have that conversation at the beginning, I love two-stepping. I live in Austin. I went out two-stepping as I like to do and met this handsome guy. And we had like a makeout and a couple times on the couch, like outside of this two-stepping bar in Southern Austin. It's really, really fun. And then the third time we hung out, we had that conversation because it was at that point. And I could have had it with him right away. It became very clear to me that I was not available for what he was offering. I was like, nope, no alignment there. And it was great. Like, no hard feelings. We just got clear on that and moved on. I think the last thing I want to touch on today is there's this whole talk in the conscious community about being in your feminine, right? Or being in your masculine. I have my own ideas about that and what that means as an individual versus like collectively telling people how they should be feminine or masculine. But I am curious, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah. I dislike the conversation a lot because I know at one point I was like, I'm trying to be feminine the way I was trying to be fit and skinny. Like I'm trying to get to this femininity. Yeah. And I just feel who gets to tell women that they're not feminine? Like we are, and there's different flavors of it, and we're all showing up to life differently. Then you throw in a nervous system that mine obviously is fight energy that put on all this solid armor to protect herself, and then to have so many people tell me that I was masculine for so long, I just felt I didn't like hearing it. It never felt good to me. I remember being in the conscious community and older women and more mature women turning around and saying things like, I used to be so masculine like you. And I just didn't like that feedback. It's kind of like walking up to someone and saying, oh, you need to eat a cheeseburger or go run on a treadmill. Like, who are you to tell me what my femininity is? Like, I'm just in my own journey of finding my own authentic expression, and telling me I'm masculine or telling me I'm not soft, or that's not actually going to help. I've never seen anyone inspired to change through being criticized. And I just think it's just another layer of like, oh, I'm not good enough. Before I was like, oh, I'm not skinny enough. Now I'm not feminine enough. Now I'm not feminine enough to attract a partner. I'm not soft enough, not open enough, not vulnerable. We're all in our journeys. And I just think, if your expression of your feminine doesn't feel good for you, that's for you to explore and ask. But to be like, oh, I need to be more feminine to attract in a man, I don't like that conversation. It doesn't. I don't love the idea of teaching femininity to people.
I agree with you.
Yeah. I love the idea of feeling really good within yourself, of looking at how you respond and react to different situations. For me, the reason I worked on my nervous system is I didn't like how I was reacting to situations. I didn't like the defensiveness and the guardedness and the abruptness and the aggression and the feeling like I had to protect myself all the times at all costs, and that how I was creating disconnection all over my life. But I wouldn't say I ever said I need to soften into my feminine. I said, no, I don't feel really great from within, and I'm not feeling myself or proud of myself. And I feel like I want to change my experience so I have more meaningful connections with myself and others.
Yeah.
Is that softening in your feminine? Maybe people say I'm softer now, great, but like I'm less armored and guarded.
Yeah.
I think I was always feminine and scared to express it because I thought my softness would be hurt or taken advantage of or manipulated or abused or betrayed. And then I had to work on, well, I get to learn how to trust myself now because I can be soft with someone and they can only take advantage of me if I don't trust myself or I'm not strong in my boundaries. And I can have boundaries without needing to scream them at someone. And so
Yes.
none of that was softening in my feminine. That was all nervous system and self-trust.
And thank you for saying that, because I think it's really important, because it is kind of weird, people are out there like, I'm going to teach you how to be a feminine woman, right? And it does become this like commodified way of being, much like being thin, being fit. I'm feminine now, right? Now I have this thing that's going to make my life so much better, and I don't need to do anything. I just need to magnetize and attract. And like, it's dope to magnetize and attract. Fuck yeah, for you, if you can get your shit done that way. I'm a woman who gets to put action forth into the world, and that's how I create what I desire. And it's a really interesting conversation. It is kind of the new trend in coaching, especially, right? Feminine embodiment coaching. And I say that not to talk shit on anybody who's doing that work, but I think you're making a really powerful point that it's nervous system work that I think at the end of the day, I can get behind that. Like, do you want to be more regulated in your authentic expression because you feel safe? Yes to that.
Yes, 1,000%.
I've heard a lot of toxic rhetoric. I mean, I work as a Vedic practitioner and sex and intimacy coach. So people come to me not only for the coaching, but for readings. And I specialize in love and sex astrology. And it's really interesting. People want this certain kind of answer. They're like, but I have to do something to create this in my life. Yeah, you do. And the, added pressure for men as well. Like, you have to always be in lead. I hear this all the time. He wasn't leading me enough. Like, I had to pay for my own tea, and I was so upset. Like, I've heard people say this. I had to pay for my own tea at coffee, and I really didn't like that. And my question becomes like, is that really your truth, or is that because you have a programming around Disney and a Hollywood ideal of what it looks like to be cared for?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I love being provided for.
Me too.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. And feeling like I can trust the man's leadership and I am provided for and I am taken care of, that allows me to soften into my nurturance and be able to give love the way that I love to overly pour into the person. And not from a lack of boundaries, but when I am in love, the word doesn't do it justice because it sounds like I have no boundaries, but it is boundaryless. It's just it's full. And I love to give like that. And his providership and his protection creates the containment for me to be able to do that. And I've also lived the experience because I've built my business to the place that it is and I can provide. I provide for a lot of people. I don't like doing it for my partner. And B, I've gone through an experience of my business flourishing whilst being in partnership with someone whose business was not. And I stepped into the provider role, and I've literally firsthand been able to experience what it does do for polarity and for that dynamic when I'm sorting everything out. And I realized how bad that really does feel for me, that paying for my own tea is a no for me. And I've tried to do it and it just didn't feel good. So I think exploring it and seeing, I've had other girlfriends, actually, I innately believe that women love to be provided for. And I feel a lot of my girlfriends right now are doing this, they're saying this thing where they feel like they have to become successful to earn being provided for, because then they know that even though and I've gone through this as well, I'm like, I want to be provided for. I deserve to be provided for. I value more traditional roles in relationship. And there's a part of me that loves knowing that he gets to know that I don't need him to. I still travel all over the world on my own accord. I can still do whatever I want. I still have a business and a team. I've got everything sorted. I don't need you, even though I want you to do it.
Yes.
But without that piece, I find it's so vulnerable to, I find it incredibly vulnerable to want him to provide.
Yeah. Yes. And I appreciate that. And I actually really enjoy that providership too. And when I haven't had it in relationship, it did kill the sexual chemistry, like
Yes.
feeling that there was a lack of motivation and inspiration. But I think with the invitation or point that I'm making about that is like, it can also like just very simply be a sign if somebody's not doing it of misalignment, right? And that a lot of energy has, I hear people put a lot of energy into like trying to correct or fix when a person does that. And it's like, well, if they don't want to do it, that's why they didn't do it, because a part of them didn't want to. Receiving that in a like a graceful way, knowing that you're not in scarcity, knowing that there are other men who love to provide in the way you desire, and there are also women who do love to be providers and they would feel really fulfilled by that role, and that's amazing. And so it's just this piece of like constantly tuning in to your fuck yes. And is this like, are you walking away from the experience feeling like bitter or confused and not saying anything, like you need to speak your truth, or and what do you make that mean, right? What do you make that mean? Like it's something that they need to do to fix themselves, or is it just simply go on, move
Well,
on?
for me, it has to be innately in there. You either, for me, the man that is a provider, he's got that fire in his belly to provide for his family, and it's probably going to stay with him until the day that he dies. Like that's there.
Yeah.
Whether the apocalypse hits or not, he is a provider.
Yeah.
And it's, for me, it only feels good when it feels good for him to do it. It doesn't feel good to receive it from expectation. It's kind
Yeah.
of like when it comes to sex and intimacy, I'm attracted to men who experience pleasure from the pleasuring of the woman. So someone that's playing more of a pleasure dom kind of role and is doing it because he receives pleasure from the doing of it.
Yes.
Now that feels very different to a man knows that he needs to, say for example, a man is intimate with a woman and he knows you have to make her come first and make sure that she enjoys herself. And when he's doing it because he knows he's meant to, and that's what's going to make the experience good for her, but he's not doing it because he really desires to and he's experiencing pleasure from it, it just doesn't do it for me. I'm like, I know that you're doing it to do the right thing. It kind of felt like my ex, where he's like, tell me what to do and tell me how you like it, and I'm going to do it that way because I know I want to do it right so that you have a great time. But I'm not feeling like him immersed in the experience. Providership for me is no different.
Yeah.
You sort everything out, you pay for all the things, you make all the plans, you organize everything in advance, and you do it because you love it. And that to me, it's like, oh my God, I love receiving that.
Yes.
You're pleasuring me because you love doing it and you're so like immersed in that experience, sexual or otherwise. And when you're just doing it because you think you're meant to, it doesn't feel good as a receiver.
Yeah. 100%.
Not for me.
Yeah. No, for me either. I mean, mirror neurons are real, right?
Yeah.
And faking it doesn't really work for that reason, right? Like, can you physically induce an orgasm that isn't really awesome? People who are molested often experience a lot of shame because as children, when they were molested, the physical stimulation generated pleasure, but they were not into it.
Yes.
Right? They were not into it. And I think that's a really beautiful point that you make there. I'd love for you to share where people can find you if they want to get more connected with you, or if you have any projects in the work that you want us to know about.
Yeah, you can find me over on Instagram at Beck Antonucci. Raw, Real, and Vulnerable is my podcast on any podcast listening platform that you love to tune in on.
Great.
And at the moment, I have small, intimate business and pleasure masterminds happening that have a maximum of 6 to 8 women that are really looking to soften, to be able to open to healthy love, to communicate their wants, needs, and boundaries, and expand their business and or career in a way that feels really aligned and really good for them, good for their nervous system. So they're creating the impact that they desire to have on the world and in the world without it coming from pressure and force and have to, and from this like tracking your months and KPIs each month and not really enjoying the fulfillment of life and forgetting why we create in the first place. So that's what's going on in my world.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And yes, definitely go check out Beck. She's an amazing leader. She's an amazing visionary and just an amazing person. And you're going to have so much fun hanging out in her space. So thank you so much for joining. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I look forward to playing with you in Austin soon.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.